Hello, lovelies. Welcome to this month's edition of Sisters in Mental Illness. I'm Shaley Hoogendoorn, and I am very passionate about sharing stories about mental health in order to smash the stigma around it. I'm a woman that lives with bipolar 2 disorder, and it took me a very, very long time to share. And once I did, I found great freedom in that. And so here we are with this series, talking to brave women that are willing to share their mental health journey. And I'm really excited to have my friend Christine here. We met like a year ago, I think. And she just has a powerful story that is really, really important to hear. And so Christine, I would love if you introduced yourself.
Yeah, of course. My name's Christine. I am 31 years old. I live in Ontario currently, hoping to get out to BC at some point soon. For work, I'm a community facilitator, so I get to work with people who have acquired brain injuries. I support them in achieving their goals for independence, or I attempt to.
Yeah.
I'm a youth leader at a local church that I have enjoyed doing since coming home. Yeah, I love Starbucks. I love the mountains and water. I love car rides, and just caring for people has been a big passion of mine. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and anxiety. Why I'm sharing my story is my hope in that sharing my story would encourage conversation. I want to be a part of ending the stigma against mental health, and that it's okay to reach out for help. It's not a weakness, and it's very brave.
Yes, 100%, 100% agree. It's hard and messy, but just beautiful, right? And I'm just so glad you're here. I would just love if you could start telling us about your journey with mental health.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in a Christian home. I have great parents. I have great memories of being a kid. I can't picture anything in my childhood that I would change. I have no complaints. When I was 12 years old, I used to play hockey with the guys on the street, and it was all guys and me, and I was taken advantage of in actually a shed. And that was something that I held on to for a long time by myself because I didn't want them to get in trouble, because I was scared, because I wanted to be liked. I also didn't want growing up in the church. You didn't talk about sex, you didn't talk about those kind of things, and so I didn't really have anywhere safe to have those conversations. So then I guess my next monumental moment would have been I've always been told I was adopted. So that was not something that my parents held for me, but I never really understood the full concept of what being adopted meant. So for me, I would tell someone I was adopted, and they'd be like, "Oh, that makes you very special." And I'd be like, "Yeah, I know." Like, just thinking I don't really understand at all what that means. So in grade 10, we had an assignment where we had to go home and talk to our families about like our heritage and our DNA and all that kind of stuff. And my parents were like, "Well, you're adopted. We don't know what that means. Like, we don't know your background. We don't know a whole lot about your birth, Mom." And I was like, "What? Like, hold up. What does that mean?" So that was kind of my first flip, where I was starting to believe that I was unlovable. I was replaced. I was not enough. And that's probably where my depression started, my anxiety started, where I started suicidal ideation. My first overdose would have been my first year out of high school. I ended up in the hospital for a while, and I didn't even end up in the psych ward because I had done so much damage to my body, and I was in more of a health crisis than I was a mental health crisis at that time.
Right.
I did leave the church. I did not find support there. It was just something that wasn't talked about. So anything that became a red flag, and it was, well, we don't know what to do with this. What do we do with this? What do we do with this? A lot of phone calls to my parents, a lot of, you need to go see a counselor, you need to go get medicated, you need to, very hands-off approach. And you just can't, it wasn't a comfortable space anymore. Yeah, so after that, I got involved a lot with like drugs and drinking, and tried to look a certain way and do certain things so that people would like me. So got a little bit involved with an eating disorder. I would have phases where I wouldn't eat for bouts of time, and I ended up in the hospital a lot of that time because I'd pass out. yeah, so just really wrong crowd. Just wanted to be accepted, find those little, but like little pieces of where I would feel loved and accepted. My Then I got involved in online dating. I've always desired to have a family, I desired to have kids,
Yeah.
and that just wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. So yeah, I went online dating, and I was trying to stay, I'm gonna set my rules and I'm gonna keep them. And
Yeah.
as time went on, I would go on a date with someone I think it'd go well. They would want to have sex, and I would say no, and then I would never hear from them again. So as time went on, I decided I was going to kind of let my guard down and see, well, maybe that's what it takes to have a relationship. I still had kind of a warped like idea of what it was like because of my experience when I was 12, and kind of still had in the back of my head, like I'm used goods, I'm dirty, I will never gain back my my purity. So what's the point in holding on to something I don't actually have? So I spent a lot of time with men, inviting them into my home. And it went from that didn't become a relationship. I just became an item that people would use. I had people who would come and go all the time. Then I guess my next thought process was that I would try and get pregnant, because it'd give me some kind of purpose. It'd give me some kind of hope, because I've always wanted to be a mom. And again, that never happened. And this was over a couple of years' time. That was kind of my focus, and nothing really happened.
Yeah.
I did meet someone, and within the first couple weeks of us hanging out, he lost his job and he lost his apartment, and he moved in with me. And it was okay for the first little while, and then he kind of flipped and became really abusive. So I was scared to come home. I had a dog at the time, and my dog would just like pee on his bed and growl at him, and so she
Wow.
was trying to be protective too. But it just got like completely out of hand. I would lock myself in my bedroom some nights, and he would just bang on the door. I was scared to come home from work, so I was working extra hours. Um, yeah, it was not good. I had a couple of people in my life who knew that what was going on, and once they started threatening to come in and get him out of my apartment, I was scared for their safety, because I didn't know what he would do. So eventually, I was able to get him out. I dropped him off downtown Kitchener and just left him. He didn't bother me anymore, but for safety reasons, I moved out of my apartment. I had lost my job. I was depressed. I was at probably my lowest point, because I had thought that this was someone who I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And even in the abusive times, I thought that he was going to be someone I'd spend the rest of my life with. It's been my desire. It's always, whether other people have children, I'm like, hey, can I hold your baby? Like, I would ask a stranger, can I hold your child? Like, that was a big source of joy for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
so as time went on and that wasn't happening, I can imagine that was very hard to carry. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are pieces of grief that I've learned that I've had to go through, but things that you wouldn't think you have to grieve.
Right.
I didn't think of grief as being something you you have to go through for something like a situation, right? You think of grief as, oh, someone passed away, I have to grieve that. But I've had to grieve. I'm 31. I'm not in a relationship. I'm not really searching for a relationship. But I'm grieving the fact that there is a huge chance that I may not ever get married. I may not ever have kids. And I have to grieve that every day.
Yeah. That's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. So so you've dropped off this person, and did he stay out of your life?
Well, I moved, and he didn't know where my parents lived. So shortly after that, I went to school. So I had lost my job and just wanted to try to better myself and try to figure out, maybe try a different route. Yeah, I went back to school, and yeah, within that, shortly after, time came that I was looking at my mental health was at its all-time low. I was in and out of the hospital constantly. I had finally found a therapist that I love, and I still see her and I love her. But I was seeing her once a week. I drive an hour to see her. I pay the money, and she's been a godsend.
Wow.
And so I was seeing her once a week. I had a psychiatrist that I was seeing once every 2 weeks. I was seeing my family doctor once every 2 weeks. I had all the support that you could possibly have. I was involved with CMHA, like Canadian Mental Health Association. trying to
Okay.
get involved in their groups. I had a worker there who was trying to get me into 2 of our rehab programs.
Right.
Stonehenge is one of them, but I had to wait for an OHIP bed, and it was just like a 8 to 12 month wait, and I was just not. So I was in and out of hospital constantly. They knew me. It'd be like, oh, Christine's back, kind of thing.
Wow.
They'd keep me overnight and send me home.
Did you actively pursue that help? Like, were you, or did you have someone that kind of was pushing, or how did that work? Because that sounds like a lot of work when you're feeling so terrible.
I had moments where it was me. I never had anyone push. I had people who were like, well, you know where your safe space is.
Right.
Because when someone has attempted, it's, you're at a higher risk. Like, even you go into the hospital and they see that, they're like, yeah, you have 4 attempts behind you. So they take it a little more seriously, which is really unfortunate, because anyone is very capable of trying to take their life. So it's
Right.
really unfortunate that it works that way, but that is how it works. So like my parents, who are fantastic, have, said, like, if you don't feel safe, where do you need to go? And like kind of putting it back on me, which was very helpful. So it wasn't like, go to the hospital, because then I would have probably been like, screw you, I'm not going to the hospital.
Right.
But going to the hospital, the other piece of that, I knew I wasn't going to get any more help. I knew I wasn't going to get any more support. They would keep me overnight and then send me home.
Wow. Wow. It all, yeah. The more I hear about certain systems, we're here for our listeners. We're here in Canada. Oh, and the OHIP. Do you want to tell people what that is real quick if they're listening and they don't know
Oh,
Ontario?
sorry. Yeah. So it's just like the government funding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So they would have beds that are, I think they're something ridiculous, like 200 and something dollars a day. Their programs were like 30 days. So even looking back on it, there's no way it would have done enough for me.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough structure. I've done more research and talked to people since then, and I know that it wouldn't have been the right space. So it worked out beautifully in the end. But OHIP, yeah, is a government funded.
Right.
They would have X amount of beds in that place.
Right. And that's like another hurdle, right? Like you get yourself there and then there's nothing there to help you. Wow.
Yeah.
So you're doing these things and you're at your lowest point, and tell me how it went from there.
So I have been volunteering at a conference. It's a Christian conference, so it always surprises me that I still go back. Like when I wasn't a Christian and had left the church and
Right.
wanted nothing to do with any of that. And I met a lady named Idolette, who is also very involved in SheLoves. And it was probably weeks after I had my last suicide attempt, and I was not in a good place. And I bumped into her, and I started talking, and every single time I'd see her and talk to her, I'd just start bawling, and I would just open up and just talk to her. And she's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with her? And shortly after, we had added each other on Facebook, and life just was not going well. And one night, it was late at night, but the time change between BC and Ontario is kind of beneficial. I had messaged her and said, what was the wording I used? Something about like, I'm at the end of my rope. And so I was telling her, like, I'm on a wait list for this, I'm on a wait list for this, I'm getting this service, I'm on this much medication. Like, all of those pieces together for some people would be beneficial, but for me, something was just really missing in there. And so she said, have you heard of Mercy Canada? And I said, absolutely not. It sounds something Jesus-y. But
Right.
that night, I looked on the website. I didn't even tell anybody. I applied within like the 5 minutes after her and I had stopped talking. And I applied. 2 months later, I was on the wait list. And I think it was 5 months after that, I was on a plane to BC to go spend some time at Mercy Canada.
Wow. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what Mercy Canada is?
Yeah, I would love to. So Mercy is a program they started in the States, but there's one in British Columbia and Surrey. They support women who they're between the ages of 19 and 30. They've upped the age. I went when I was 29, and 3 weeks later I turned 30, and turned 29, and they had changed the age. Or no, I was there for 2 birthdays, so I get confused. I turned 29, and the age was 29, so they've upped it to 30 now. So they support young women who have life controlling issues. So this can look different for a lot of people. There were women there who were pregnant, younger women who were pregnant who needed support, people with mental health, people with eating disorders,
Yeah.
people who have addictions, people who have been a part of abuse or sex trafficking.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a 6 to 9 month program, but they definitely will support you through whatever your needs are. I ended up there for 13 months, so little more than what they had said it was, but it was 100% worth it.
Wow. Wow. So you are headed on a plane and you are going to BC, and were you scared? What were you,
Oh
was it
gosh,
just, this is my
yes.
last hope? What were you thinking?
Bit of both.
Yeah.
So I met like I said, I met Edilette at a conference.
Yeah.
I talked to her for like maybe twice in a weekend. I have her on Facebook. We have one conversation, like a conversation about Mercy, and I don't really talk to, and nobody here knows anything about Mercy.
Right.
So I'm literally jumping on a plane, not knowing anything about this place besides what I can see on a computer screen and some phone
Right.
call conversations I've had. So I could be sent off to who knows where. Someone could not pick me up from the airport. I don't know what's gonna happen.
Right.
But yes, that's exactly it. It was my last hope. The normal Christine would never like step foot in a Christian building.
Yeah.
I would not have, like, I knew it was a Christian environment, but they did talk about, like, you don't have to be a Christian to come. Like, we just want to
Right.
support you and love you and care for you. And I was like, hey, that's fine. I remember sending emails back to my counselor before I went, saying, I am, like, what if they don't want me? Like, I don't believe in Jesus and I'm not going to change my mind. And I'm like, what if they can't fix me? What if, like, all the what ifs.
Yeah.
So I went with a lot of different emotions, a lot of different feelings, a lot of different, I'm literally going into the unknown.
Wow.
But there's a glimmer of hope that, well, maybe this is what I need. And why not go out to BC where I can be with the mountains and the water? Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And Edilette has a way of helping us open up and see and trust her. Yeah.
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 So, yeah, tell me about those 13 months. Tell me
Mm-hmm.
about how it was for you.
I spent my first probably 3 months hating everybody and everything. Um, so I have been a very independent person most of my life. I could jump in my car, go wherever I wanted. I could buy whatever I wanted. I could, like, see whoever I wanted.
Mhm.
Mercy puts you in a bubble, which at the beginning was very, very difficult for me. So I have there's staff there all the time. You have to like ask. You have to ask a lot. Like, am I allowed to go outside? Am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? They have a very strict routine schedule. So things like Bible reading, classes. We were doing fitness 4 times a week, which for someone like me who used to fight the teacher for the closest door to the classroom did not go very well at the beginning.
I hear you.
They put you on a meal plan. No matter what you're there for, they put everyone on the same program.
Right.
The meal plans change a little bit as you're there, but you're on a meal plan. There's regular, like, this is when you go to bed, this is when you get up.
Yeah.
So they put you in a very routine space, which for me, I didn't realize. I hated it at the beginning, but I didn't realize how beneficial it was for me to be sleeping like regularly, exercising, eating healthy. I weighed about 300 pounds when I went out there. And in that time, I felt so much better to be eating. Like my brain was able to function at a higher capacity, that I was able to,
Right.
have those counseling sessions and start working through some things and learning. Yeah, we had counseling. We get homework for counseling. So, like,
Yeah.
usually reading books and doing some, like, reports and, like, some self-reflective stuff, which was
Mhm.
really beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost like what I've learned. It seems like we might have a similar rebel streak. I would get so frustrated at therapy or when I went to different things, because I'm like, Kate, are you understanding how dire this is? I'm like, write in my journal, like, drink my water and sleep. Like, do you not, like, it just seemed like it had to be like a bam answer. Do you know what I mean? Like, it seemed like it had to be,
100%.
yeah, a big thing. And what I'm learning, and even now being,
Mhm.
stable for a lot of years, it's those little things that add up to the big thing of health, right?
100%.
And it took me a long time not to fight that. And I don't know what, for our listeners, we're recording in the time of the pandemic, and I even noticed sometimes, you know, with the struggle with this, even last week I started staying up till 2 or 3, and I noticed right away my thinking, I just don't think the same, and I get in this really negative space, and then I'm like, oh yeah, you're not doing the things. And so it sounds like they're very aware of this. And I wanted to ask you something, because I struggled with this too, and I'm always curious about it. So during the months that I was depressed, so it goes cycle of depressed and then mania, and I had complete disordered eating. But when I was manic, no problems at all. So at one time they said I had an eating disorder, and then they're like, but wait, it's only 4 months of the year. And I've learned now that that's a huge thing in bipolar, that something to control. Like, it was the only thing I could control. I'm wondering if it was similar for you.
Very much so. I didn't realize it's because like I said before, I never sat in my pain, and I never I didn't really think about things. And so going to Mercy, another thing that was brought to my attention is I have major control issues, and which also came out in forms of perfectionism. So if I can't control one area, I'm going to make sure everything else is perfect, so that if that one area is wrong, at least I'm not a complete failure.
Yes.
But control is huge. Control is huge. One of my tools that I actually walked away from Mercy was, when my life feels like it's in chaos, the one thing that really helps me is to try to find one task and focus on it to completion. So at Mercy, they let me go out and weed the back garden. So I would pick a chunk of the garden, and I would be like, okay, I can't control what's going on today. I can't control what I have to do, or what I'm going to do. So I will sit here and I will work on this part of the garden until it's done. And then I honestly, I could feel just like a weight lifted after, because I'd be like, it's done. I did one thing.
Yeah. And they say in therapy too, set yourself up for success. So for example, we think we should be doing this, right? I was always like, well, if you're going to do devotions, it has to look like this hour. Or if you're going to go for a hike, it has to be at least this long. And when I was at my worst, my therapist said, make your goal, I'm going to walk to the end of the driveway, because that is something, what is something you can do? Because you're almost tricking your brain, because it feels like, okay, I accomplished something, or okay, I can do hard things because I did that. I think so often we set ourselves up for failure, because we think we have to do, something huge. Or I don't know about you, but with the perfection thing, there was always this is the right way to do it, and I'm not doing it that way. Especially, I was like that. I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but with church, and there was always this, well, you didn't grow up, and you don't know the rule, and everybody else kind of knows the rules. So I lost a bit of who I was, because I was trying to be what I thought I was supposed to be, and it wasn't really freeing, because then I was like, oh, well, Jesus can only love this, but then deep down I knew that wasn't fully me. So tell me about, okay, so your first 3 months, very, very hard. You're like, people, this is I'm not happy about this, but you stayed, and then tell me about the next bit.
So I ended up giving in to the I can't do this alone anymore, and so I rededicated my life to God. And it would have been maybe 3 months after that, after I got there, just because there was nowhere I could go with Mercy if I wasn't going to make that choice. So, and it was, again, that last, well, I can't do this on my own. It's been 3 months, nothing's happening, so there's obviously got to be something more. But but things didn't change right away. Like I still fought my, like, about reading my Bible, and even like reading the books we were supposed to read. I was like, I still question this, and I still question this. And I had this constant why in my head. Why would God let these things happen to me? And we were like, well, he doesn't let them happen to you. I was like, but he could easily reach down and he could have stopped that, and he could have, like, but the more I got involved in like having those conversations with people, the more I was understanding, that this is not his doing. We live in a broken world. We live in sin, like, and we did this to ourselves. So I had to learn that and get over the fact of the why. Like, why, if I'm going to sit here and ask why, I'm literally never going to get an actual answer.
Right.
And I'm just driving myself to complete, like, I was going crazy with it. I was stuck every single time someone would say something. I'm like, well, why? Like, there's just sometimes, and that's really what faith is, right? Like, living in we don't know, and just being able to know that God has something better for us. We had a lady come in and do what are they, like, what's the word, prophecies. And so some of the things that was shared in my prophecy were just mind blowing, like, because I knew it wasn't her. I knew it wasn't her. I knew that God had to be speaking through her. And it was a lot of like, God saying, you need to let me take this season and get to know me and build this relationship with me, because there was just, and like, forgiveness for what I had believed, attempting suicide. I had believed, because I'd been told by the church, this is like the worst thing that you could possibly do. You are taking over as the position of God because you have chosen to try to end your life, which only God should be able to do. Wow. So to, like, forgiveness from that just like lifted huge weights off my shoulders, because it was
carry so
like,
much shame, right? I feel like it's such a terrible narrative where people are not understanding the depths of desperation, right? I get so frustrated when people are like, oh, that's so selfish, or that's so this. Can you imagine how a person feels that feels like the only way out? And then we add shame to that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
shame is the worst.
Well, and for me, when I struggled, it was because I always, I kind of have drawn, like, the way my brain works is I think of the negative first, right? Like, I have to work really hard not to do that. So I was always stuck in, like, I am bad, I am sinful, I am this, and that completely put up walls with even having a relationship with God, really, and with Jesus, because I needed to believe that I was good, and I needed to believe that he believed, and that that the Creator believes that I am good. And I understand that there's a shadow side. I understand all of that, but I already, a lot of narratives are like, confess or this or that. I thought about the bad parts of me all the time, right? 100%. Like, all the time. I needed a different way. And I think that's how, we need to be really careful, how we talk about things. I don't know. I found that was a huge barrier for me. I don't know.
Yeah. One of the things Mercy also does with everyone who comes in is we do something called truth statements, which were, at the beginning, I was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. But as time went on and you actually start to believe them, it's like, how does that happen? So what they get you to do is take like a recipe card or a cue card, and you write the lie you believe about you on the front. So for me, failure was a massive one. Failure. I was a failure. Even if like half of the things I was doing was okay, I was still a failure. So then on the back of it, we would find a Bible verse in the Bible to combat that lie. So it would be like, like he talks in the Bible a lot about how we're not going to be perfect, but with him, like, he can do all things through us. So trying to find a Bible verse to combat that. And then above it would be a line of just something like kind of wrapping up that Bible verse and like completely fighting that lie. So like, I am not a failure. I can do all things because I have God on my side. Right. So then what they would get you to do is, so you're first writing it out, and then they get you to read it to yourself, like in your head, and then they make you read them out loud, and then they make you read them in front of a mirror. So this is like over my entire 13 months. This is like the process of this. And the entire time I'm going, this is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid.
Yeah.
But there was a point where I think that was a piece of it. There was a lot of pieces that came into place, but there was a piece of it where I was starting to finally believe and find this core of who I am,
Yeah.
beyond, you know, what other people are saying, or beyond what those lies are that I had believed for so many years. Just like refreshing the mind, right? And so when you speak
Well,
those
that's
words,
good. Refreshing the mind. Yeah.
refresh, yeah, I like our words. um, yeah, so that was huge. And it helped, like when you find that core and and you're able to transform the negative words, that's for me where I was starting to see growth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just interesting. Our brains are so interesting in how open they are to suggestion,
Mm-hmm.
which can be bad, but also be good, because the power of speaking things aloud or speaking things
Yeah.
over yourself, even if you don't believe them at first, right?
Yeah.
You can rewire. I find so much hope in that. And I've gone back, because like you, I don't have, as a small child, like I don't have big T trauma, right? But I instantly think to a few negative things, and I've had to like, hey mom, or hey, or hey friend, tell me something really good about that time, and almost like have to replace it a bit. And not that I can't admit that that was painful, it's just I can't stay in it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then tell me, before we wrap up, I could talk to you forever. Tell me about, so you've had this transformation through this program, right? And you, like you said, it's a bubble. It needed to be. And, but then you graduate, and then you go back to where things were. Tell me about that transition. That must be really hard.
It was very hard. I came home a changed person, because everyone who knew me before knew me as someone who needed help, someone who was always, a risk to themselves. I like the suicidal thoughts I haven't had a suicidal thought in over a year now, and I lived in that world for 15 years. So for people who knew me before, it was very hard for them. Like they needed to see a new Christine, and they needed to see me walk it out, which for me was really hard, because I came home going, I'm great, like this is great, like I'm super excited to start life. And there's also a piece with Mercy that's called aftercare, which was could have been very super helpful, except that it also involves people, and people don't always work with the system. So they help you connect with an accountability partner who it didn't work out for me in that area. You try and find a church in your home area, but again, like I'm in BC, I'm moving back to Ontario. I
Yeah.
don't really like watching things online, doesn't really give me a great grasp of what a church is.
Right.
So I've tried a bunch of churches, still didn't find like a home church that I felt comfortable in. My social anxiety has actually like definitely gotten worse. But I'm okay. Like I'd rather deal with that than I would deal with like the suicidal ideation.
Right.
So going to a church and being in a big group of people is, for me, just I have a lot of social anxiety when it comes to that.
Right.
It's hard for me to have conversations with people besides one-on-one. So again, starting that is very difficult. I was supposed to go right back to school, and it took a longer amount of time than it was supposed to. I was supposed to go to a placement that we had arranged, and that one fell through.
Oh,
It took longer time. Like a lot of my relationships have turned from relationships to either completely gone,
yeah.
or I have an amazing network. I have an amazing network of people. I know if I were to reach out to someone, they would be supportive. It would be difficult, but they would be supportive. And I proved that in, like, I did a Mercy walk to raise money, and I was able to raise like 5,300. So
Oh,
that just shows my network, and I have some incredible people in my world, and I'm so thankful for them. But like the friends, like a core group of friends where I can sit and talk to. I don't really have that, and that's been very difficult for me.
Yeah.
So there's definitely been, it's been great to see some growth. It's been great to kind of test the waters and be like, is this really, like, I was always thinking, is the other shoe going to drop? Is this going to go back where it was?
Right.
But a lot of that stuff has stayed, but there have been a lot of trials. Trying to figure out, like, I don't, if you've ever been to Ontario and lived here for a winter, you would want to get out of here as fast as you possibly could. So that like winter, again, having to learn a winter was a struggle.
Right.
Yeah, it's been beautiful and very difficult at the same time.
I can imagine. And I can imagine that if people, like, if there's, I don't know about you, because I don't live in the same town where I grew up. I grew up north in Prince George, and I find that sometimes when I go there, like I revert back to like this person that I was when I left, and then I wasn't like, it's not a huge thing, but I notice the shifts, and I'll have little behaviors that I didn't have before, right? Like, or I don't know, or I get in my parents' house and I kind of get like immature again. Like, do you know what I mean? And so I imagine that there was these places with these cycles and these, just behaviors that are very, very hard to break.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that
for...
you're so honest about how, things weren't rainbows and puppies right after, right? And I think, right? I think that that's, a testament to you being honest and sitting in your pain and stuff. And I did pick up on the other shoe to drop. I think that's a huge, because I have anxiety as well. A huge anxiety thing, like, oh, things are good, but just wait. Or like, I'm always bracing myself, like, oh, this is good now, but, right? Instead of, this is good now, and this is gonna be good now, and I just stay here. And that's hard. That's hard. Oh, thank you for sharing, friend. That's so beautiful. We can also, in our post, we'll put the Mercy website in case there's anybody that's listening that might be something that they need or want to apply for. I'm so grateful that you went and that you're still here.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. And if you do move here, I can't wait. We will drink the water and walk in the mountains and do the little things, right? It'll be amazing. All right. Thank you.